This is a must-watch for horror movie enthusiasts, and it also marks James Wan's masterpiece, with over 100,000 viewers giving it an incredible rating of 8.2. Insidious. Chapter 2 is considered one of the top 10 horror films worldwide, filled with non-stop tension. Grab your best friend and watch it now. The film begins with the psychic Elise trying to perform an exorcism on the boy Josh, who has a natural ability to communicate with spirits. Whenever he falls asleep, his soul leaves his body. Initially, Lorraine thinks Josh is just having nightmares, but she becomes concerned when she notices that in recent photos of her son, there is always an elderly woman wearing a black wedding dress. It's then that she realizes the situation is far more serious than she thought. She calls in psychic Elise for help with the exorcism. To uncover the identity of the bride in black, Elise hypnotizes Josh and begins her questioning.
She says she's a friend. She visits me every night.
Where is she? Right at this moment.
Following Josh's guidance, Elise enters his bedroom. She initially expects the bride in black to be hiding under the bed, but when she looks underneath, it's completely empty. Just then, the closet door behind her swings open on its own. Elise immediately guesses that the bride in black is hiding inside. Sure enough, as she approaches the closet, she is suddenly scratched by the spirit. Elise is terrified, as she has never encountered such a powerful, evil entity. In the end, Elise tells Lorraine that the bride in black has been targeting Josh because she wants to take over his body, while his soul is astral projecting. To prevent the bride in black's plan from succeeding, Elise decides to seal off Josh's memories of astral projection. As long as Josh no longer astral projects, the bride in black won't be able to do anything. As this happens, Josh, who had been in a deep sleep, suddenly stands up and begins speaking strange words. Josh walks toward the living room with his eyes closed, then points at a door. The next moment, that door opens on its own. After witnessing this eerie event, Lorraine becomes even more convinced that her son is being haunted by a ghost. She urgently helps Elise put Josh back in the chair. Elise begins to hypnotize Josh again. Years later, Josh lives a normal life, having gotten married and had 3 children. However, no one anticipated that Josh's eldest son, Dalton, inherited his ability to communicate with spirits, leading them to seek Elise's help once more. But the bride in black holds a deep grudge against Elise, and this time, she kills Elise on the spot. To escape the bride in black's clutches, Josh takes his wife and children to temporarily live at his mother's house. On their first night there, Renee hears piano music coming from the music room. She assumes it's her mother-in-law playing the piano, but when she enters the room, she finds it empty. When she returns to the bedroom, the piano music starts again. Renee thinks it's just a prank by the kids, but when she rushes back to the music room, there is still no one there. At that moment, she hears her daughter crying upstairs, so she rushes back to the bedroom. What she sees shocks her. Her baby daughter, who had been sleeping in the crib, is now on the floor crying hysterically. Keep in mind, her daughter is only a few months old and couldn't possibly have climbed out of her crib. Coupled with the strange piano music, Renee starts to suspect that something sinister has followed them here. However, Josh doesn't share her view. He thinks Renee is just imagining things and dismisses her concerns. After hearing her husband's explanation, Renee reluctantly accepts it. Late at night, Josh's mother, Lorraine, decided to quietly check on her grandson before going to bed.
There's someone standing behind you.
To her surprise, Dalton, still fast asleep, was able to sense someone near him. Lorraine was startled by this and thought someone had broken into the house. However, when she looked behind her, no one was there. Still uneasy, Lorraine quietly tiptoed into the living room, but found nothing out of the ordinary. Just as she thinks it was nothing, a woman in white suddenly flashes past her. Lorraine initially thought it was Renee, but when she chased after the woman, she disappeared. Lorraine thought she might be overly tired and had imagined it, so she decided to take some medicine. But then she clearly saw a woman standing at the door through the mirror. When she turned to get a better look, a gust of cold wind blew from outside, locking the door. Lorraine cautiously opened the door, only to find Josh standing there. Looking at her son, who adamantly said no one was there, Lorraine decided she must have mistaken what she saw. However, the next morning Dalton told his mother he had had a nightmare. In his dream, he clearly saw his grandmother visiting him, and there was also a strange woman in white in the room. Then his soul left his body, and he saw his father talking to an invisible person in the hallway.
You have to go.
It was Daddy,
You have to.
and he was talking to someone.
Since Renee didn't know about Josh and Dalton's ability to astral project, she assumed it was just a normal nightmare. But soon, she changed her thought. When Renee was home alone, she saw the woman in white ghost again, now sitting on the couch. The ghost slowly stood up and left, moving swiftly to the baby's room. She locked the door, trapping Renee outside. Then came the sound of angry yelling from the woman and the cries of Renee's daughter. Standing outside the door, Renee panicked and desperately tried to break it open. To her shock, both the daughter and the white-clad ghost vanished without a trace. Just as she was about to lose hope, she heard her daughter crying downstairs. Renee rushes toward the sound, however, before she could see her daughter. From that point on, the family, except for Josh, began to accept the fact that their house was haunted again. In order to rid themselves of the white-clad ghost, Lorraine had no choice but to call on Elise's 2 assistants and her psychic friend, Carl, for help. Carl usually communicates with spirits by using dice. When he asked his questions and rolled dice with English letters on them, he received answers. Before long, Carl contacted Elise's spirit and asked about the identity of the white-clad ghost. The answer that Elise provided was the name of an abandoned hospital. To Carl's surprise, Lorraine was very familiar with this hospital because she had once worked there as a doctor. That night, they visited the abandoned hospital. As they passed by a patient room, Carl felt an overwhelming sense of resentment emanating from inside, indicating that the room was somehow connected to the white-clad ghost. Lorraine recognized it as an intensive care unit. The patient who had stayed there was an elderly man named Parker. The reason she remembered it so clearly was because she had once brought young Josh to this ward. At that time, Parker had suddenly lunged at Josh as though he had gone mad upon seeing him. A few days later, Lorraine ran into Parker in the elevator and greeted him warmly. However, Lorraine later heard from a colleague that Parker had jumped to his death that morning, meaning the person she had seen in the elevator was actually Parker's ghost. To uncover the connection between Parker and the white-clad ghost, they followed the address from Parker's medical records and arrived at his home. However, they were puzzled to find that Parker, a man, had a bedroom decorated like that of a young girl's. While the 2 assistants were complaining, they suddenly noticed a doll on the bed. What was even more terrifying was that the doll spoke and ordered them to leave. The 2 assistants, startled and obedient, turned around and quickly left. Soon, they discovered a hidden room, which contained a dozen or so corpses. Nearby, they found some newspapers documenting the killings attributed to the bride in black. It was said that the bride in black was an elderly woman who wore a black wedding dress and a veil. Among the bodies, one doll in particular closely resembled the bride in black. Carl, seeing this, touched the black wedding dress and performed a séance, instantly uncovering the truth from that time. The bride in black was actually Parker himself, and the white-clad ghost was his twisted mother. She had forced Parker to dress as a girl from a young age and had even coached him to take on the bride in black persona, going on to murder people. This led to Parker's deep envy of children who had happy, normal childhoods. When Parker saw Josh, who had the ability to astral project, he became fixated on the idea of taking over Josh's body. That's why he acted so excited and eventually jumped to his death a few days later. Hearing Carl's words, Lorraine began to connect the strange behavior of her son lately. She couldn't help but wonder if Parker had already possessed Josh, as Lorraine feared ever since Josh had astral projected to the Further to save his son, his body had been taken over by Parker. Meanwhile, when Renee woke up from unconsciousness, she hurriedly told her husband that the house was haunted again. But when she told him about the white-clad ghost knocking her out, Josh insisted it was just a hallucination. As they argued, they suddenly heard the familiar sound of piano music coming from the music room downstairs. However, when they entered the room, the music stopped. At that moment, Renee has a sudden realization. She walked over to the piano and began playing the very same tune that had just sounded. Josh's reaction to this makes Renee begin to question whether this is truly her husband.
You don't know that song?
No, I don't.
That's my song. The song I wrote for you.
Josh immediately realized his mistake and came up with an excuse to leave the room. Once they were gone, the real Josh appeared by the piano. It turned out Josh's soul had never left the house. He had been trying to warn his wife that the person she thought was Josh was actually an imposter. He had been playing a song that only the two of them knew as a signal. The next morning, Lorraine returned home and immediately informed Renee about Parker possessing Josh's body. Given her husband's recent strange behavior, Renee doesn't hesitate to believe Lorraine. She decides to leave the house with her children. Carl, holding a tranquilizer, knocked on the door and claimed he was invited by Lorraine. However, Carl soon noticed something strange. Josh has his left hand hidden behind his back the entire time.
What have you got behind your back?
Why don't you ask your dice what I have behind my back?
Hearing Josh's words, Carl threw his dice, and the result showed a knife. At that moment, Josh stopped pretending. He pulled out the knife and attacked Carl. The two assistants, who had been listening in through the intercom, rushed to the scene to rescue Carl. But they are quickly subdued. One is knocked unconscious by Josh, and the other is stabbed with the tranquilizer in the thigh and falls into unconsciousness. When Carl regained consciousness, he found himself in the further, the spiritual realm, where he saw the real Josh. Carl instantly realized that he had been killed by the imposter Josh. To defeat Parker and his mother, they would have to seek Elise's help. Meanwhile, in the real world, the imposter Josh used Carl's phone to inform Lorraine that everything had been taken care of, successfully luring them back home. Back in the further, as Josh and Carl searched for Elise, Josh unexpectedly discovered a lost spirit trying to harm his daughter. Without hesitation, he charges at the spirit to protect her. But he's no match for the ghost. Just then, Elise appeared, holding a lantern, and immediately banished the evil spirit, sending it flying. Elise, true to her reputation as a master medium, quickly devised a plan upon learning that Parker had possessed Josh's body. Her strategy was simple: capture the king to catch the thief. If they could eliminate Parker's mother, Parker's vengeful spirit would dissipate as well.
There in the darkness, she has a home where all her memories live from her life. Use those memories to draw her out of your vessel so that you can get back into your body.
The only person who knew the location of the room was the pre-memory sealed Josh, so they traveled back in time to the night when Elise had sealed Josh's memories. When Josh asked young Josh about the room's location, he stood up and pointed to a room beside them. Then Josh, Carl, and Elise walked in and indeed saw a red door. It was clear that something was hidden behind this door. Meanwhile, Lorraine and Renee noticed that the imposter Josh was fiddling with Carl's dice, which made them realize that Carl must be in trouble. When the imposter Josh realized he had been exposed, he decided to kill them to silence them. As he hunts them through the house, Josh from the further opens the red door to find young Parker facing a harsh treatment from his mother. It turned out that Parker had not only been forced by his mother to dress as a girl from a young age, but also faced harsh punishment at the slightest mistake. What shocked Josh and the others was that the mother in Parker's memories could not only see them, but could also reach out and strangle Josh's neck. In the real world, Renee, trying to escape the imposter Josh, had taken the children to the basement. However, the imposter Josh broke through the door and pursued them. Just as the imposter Josh raised a hammer, ready to kill Dalton, Elise in the further swung a chair and slammed it into Parker's mother from behind. Once she eliminated Parker's mother, Parker's ghost vanished as well. With that, the real Josh was finally able to return to his body. Afterward, Elise reminded Carl to return quickly because Carl wasn't actually dead. He had fallen into a deep coma and still had a chance to survive. Once they all returned to the real world, Josh decided to have Carl perform another hypnosis on them to permanently erase their ability to astral project and sever any further connection to the further. But little do they know, the red door from earlier still hides a much greater secret. That's the end of today's story. See you next time.